Good evening, everyone. You're watching the Walkout Network, and this is Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. It is my great privilege to be taking the seat from our normal host, Ant Walker, and it is also my great privilege to welcome back to the show our special guest this evening, Ms. Kristen King of My MMA News. How are you doing, Kristen?
I'm doing good. Thank you guys for inviting me back. I love doing this with you guys.
And with us, as always, is the man with the numbers, the facts and figures, the author of Fight Facts, Sherdog Associate Editor Jay Petrie. Jay, how are you doing?
I'm looking forward to tonight. It's going to be a fun show. We have a whole lot to talk about. So let's get started. Stat of the week. My stat of the week is 0. Let's start off big and heavy. 0. Number of strikes that Donald Cerrone landed on Conor McGregor in the main event. 0 strikes landed. Period. The end. The last time he hasn't landed a strike in a fight is all the way back in his WEC debut in 2007 when he pulled off a triangle in about a minute and tested positive for a diuretic. So yeah, not a single strike landed.
Not a good look for the Cowboy. I'm sure we'll get to him in a bit. And because Ant is not here, I feel that in his honor, I must offer up something that Ant would say, and something that Ant would probably say that I would agree with is that there is nothing like a Monday after a Conor McGregor fight card that also happens to be Martin Luther King Day to get the full spectrum of garbage takes on social media on all things. So that's for you, Ant.
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Thank you. And with that, let's just roll right into the thing we all need to talk about. UFC 246 was Saturday night. It was the return of the notorious Conor McGregor after 15 months on the shelf, 15 months in which he has been busy in all the wrong ways, most people would say. Lots of questions to be answered, and most of them, at least, he seems to have answered in about 40 seconds. The question we have on the table for us was UFC 246 the biggest fight card in recent memory with the fewest post-fight implications? And that is, I'd love to hear your take on it, Jay.
You know, I was thinking about old cards that were blockbuster, quote unquote, blockbuster cards that everybody tuned in to see that didn't really have much of a takeaway afterwards. And even leading up to it, you'd go, okay, all right, these are some good fights, but there's nothing. What will come from this? I think I'd probably have to go back to when Anderson Silva fought Nick Diaz at UFC 183, not only because their fight was totally meaningless, but because they both tested positive for banned substances after the fight. So no possible outcome could have been anything besides a no contest. But at the same time, in the co-main, Tyron Woodley fought a middleweight. He fought Kelvin Gastelum, who missed by 10 pounds, which gave Woodley a title shot. So at least there was that. At least there's some action, some movement in the division. You look at Conor Diaz too, but at the same time on that card, Anthony Johnson uppercutted the life out of Glover Teixeira, and he got a title shot too. So when you look at this event, I mean, yeah, Conor has options, but a title shot would be stupid. The co-main event, do we need to see Holly Holm in another title shot? And then you go down the card and go, okay, what really changed? So I don't know. Kristen, did anything change?
I mean, as far as lightweight and welterweight goes, as weird as it is to say, yeah, a lot of things changed because there are so many things now open for Conor. And I think this was possibly the best case scenario for him. And he has those names at 155. He has the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. He has the Tony Ferguson fight. Then you move up into a weight class, which is what he just competed in, which was welterweight. He has the Jorge Masvidal fight. He has the Kamaru Usman fight. He has the Nate Diaz trilogy to complete if he were to do that at 170, which I'm pretty sure that's what it will take place in, considering that's what the first two did. So there is a lot of things that changed for Conor. I think this is exactly what they were banking on. A win like over Donald Cerrone would have gotten him. And it's crazy because there are so many different names. It's hard to figure out what direction we go in. He's trying to downplay the Khabib Nurmagomedov rematch as something that he's not really interested in right now. It's just a name on his list. He doesn't want the Jorge Masvidal fight. Now Jorge is saying he doesn't want that fight. There's just a lot of confusion, but the gates have opened up at lightweight and welterweight. It's just a matter of which person does Conor choose.
And honestly, you kind of segued right into the next thing I was going to ask. I mean, the question on the table is, what's next for Conor McGregor? But I want to actually ask you two questions, Kristen. Mm-hmm. One, what do you think will actually be next for Conor? And two, in a perfect world, or if you were Empress of the Universe to anyone other than Jay and me, what would be next for him if it were up to you?
So what comes next? If something were to happen between the Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, then that is obviously what would happen. And I really don't mean to jinx it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to jinx it. But
TJ DeSantis said it earlier today. The jinx has been in for years. Don't worry.
I mean, it's been tried. The fight has been tried to happen like 4 different times. So we're trying with this one, and I'm hoping that the last one is the good one. But if something were to happen, I think Conor would slide into that fight immediately. We just don't know who that would be, like who pulls out first, if it's Khabib or Tony. Logically, I would love to see him fight Justin Gaethje. That'd be a great #1 contender fight. But it feels weird to even say that because it doesn't even feel like Conor McGregor is like a #1 contender. It just feels like he is going to get a title shot no matter what, considering what he has done in both divisions and what he just did, a 40-second absolute smashing of Cowboy Cerrone. So I would like to see a Justin Gaethje fight, or if we really want to be nostalgic and just take it back a little bit, let's revisit the Nate Diaz. Let's call it a day afterwards, and then we can see what he wants to do after that. But those are probably the only fights that I would want to see. Oh, and if I was Empress of the World, as you so beautifully put it, I would love to see the Jorge Masvidal fight, but it's like out of sheer chaos, because I know how big that fight would be, and I know the many different ways that fight could unfold, and I just want to see it. I told someone on Twitter the other day that I was not behind it at first, but now I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, I'm behind it. I want to see whatever is going to happen from this fight, and if that means Jorge Masvidal is gonna smash Conor, great. If that means Conor is gonna smash Jorge, awesome, whatever. But I would love to see what would unfold with that fight. And I might be slightly biased because I am also from Miami. So, of course, I want to see the Miami boy get his job done.
In just a question to throw up, before you jump in, Jay, in a just and perfect world, does Justin Gaethje have to do anything else to earn this next title shot? Because the idea of putting him in a title eliminator implies that he has not already earned it in some way.
I don't really have an interest to kind of springboard off what Kristen said. I don't personally have an interest in seeing Conor McGregor fight for a title. I don't want to see it. Not only because of history, but because of activity levels and everything like that. The guy has won titles in 2 different weight classes, has never defended a single one. Now, would he defend them if he got them this time? I don't know. How many times do we need to touch the fire to see that it burns? I don't see that it wouldn't end well. It's more of a trophy, a status symbol at this point for a lot of fighters to hold on. I mean, Khabib at the same time, Khabib hasn't fought since 229. So that lightweight title has been on the shelf forever. I don't want to see it held up any longer. I want the Khabib-Tony fight to happen. Justin Gaethje doesn't need to prove anything, but the way Dana's talking about it, he's going to have to. And that's crazy. I'm pretty sure that he's the first fighter in UFC history. I'll need to fact check myself. First fighter in UFC history to ever score 3 consecutive knockouts in the first round at lightweight. So, and it was against legit guys, Edson Barboza, James Vick, and Donald Cerrone, and he smashed all 3 of them. So what does Justin Gaethje need to do? But on the other hand, Tony Ferguson's won 12 fights in a row. So, the scales, everybody's all weird. In a just universe, Conor McGregor would not be close to a title shot. He would fight Jorge Masvidal. He would fight Justin Gaethje. He would fight Nate Diaz, because those are kind of the fights that they're relevant, but they're not holding up and clogging up a division. They can do their thing on their own, and you guys go have fun over there, and then we can have Usman and whatever else is going to come from those divisions. But something that struck me, and maybe it was a throwaway thing, and I read too much into it. He called out Paul Felder. What a weird call out! Because at the post fight interview that he did with Joe Rogan, Conor McGregor said he'll take on anybody. He's comfortable at welterweight. Even the guy over there on the desk right there, I'll take him on. So that was pretty much the only actual call out he made post fight, because he said, I'll take any one of you guys and do whatever. But then he kind of pointed at Felder. So if Felder gets through Hooker, sign me up. Let's do it. I'm down with that. And I don't really have a good place to segue this in, so I'm just going to go with it here. The UFC 246, the press conference that had the pre-fight press conference that happened, I want to give a shout out to Morgan Campbell of the Toronto Star, because he's the only journalist that asked a question about Conor McGregor's sexual assault allegations at the press conference. Now, what's next for Conor McGregor probably should include legal trouble too. Or a resolution, or further investigation, charges, no charges, whatever it may be. There should be some resolution too. So I want to kind of point that out too.
That's a very good point. He was the only one to ask. He was roundly booed.
Wow. Everybody yelled at him. Everybody. Donald Cerrone yelled at him. That was very strange.
Donald Cerrone at that point, knew, that he was on the cusp of a career-changing paycheck, probably. But yeah, that was an ugly and an unpleasant thing, and the discussion about it, at least on social media, in the wake of it, really kind of damaged my faith in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Made me question all my life choices. But let's move on to something that is more cheerful news, depending on how you feel about things. The biggest underdog on the UFC 246 card was Roxanne Modafferi. She was a plus 900 underdog, a little more than that.
1,000.
Plus 1,000?
No, I'm sorry. Barber was minus 1,000. Roxy was plus 650.
Sorry. Barber was minus 900 or minus 1,000 apparently, through at least some of the betting outlets. Modafferi as much as a 6-1 underdog, and pulled off the win, pulled off the upset, pulled it off in convincing fashion. I mean, we may talk about what may or may not have been wrong with Barber's leg and at what point during the fight it happened. But in terms of what happened just in the cage, Modafferi destroyed her. Handled herself just fine on the feet, took her back on the floor, landed some of the ground and pound that has become an interesting hallmark of Roxanne Modafferi's game in the last 2 or 3 years, including elbows. Cut her. She was bleeding by the end of the fight. There was no question at the end of that who won. Question, swing or miss, and we will start with you, Kristen. Is this one of the biggest upsets in UFC history?
I'm pretty sure as far as statistics goes, yes. And all of the odds makers, sure. But as far as the fight itself, I think Roxanne had the best game plan to exploit all of the holes that Maycee Barber had. And it really frustrated me to see Roxanne being treated as a stepping stone. Now, listen, I'm very high on Maycee Barber. I think she's absolutely talented. I definitely think that she can accomplish a lot of what she's trying to set out to be. I know she's trying to be the youngest champion in the UFC, and those are lofty goals. But you know what? They're not so far-fetched, and I truly believe in someone like Maycee Barber. But unfortunately, there are going to be times where experience is always going to match over youth. And I think this was a prime example of that. I think Roxanne Modafferi has shown tremendous growth since working with John Wood over there at Syndicate. I believe she's still there. And she's come so far from like the Roxanne that we saw in The Ultimate Fighter, was like season 15 or something like that, where she just looked easy to beat. She looked like the kind of person they would match Maycee Barber up with to make an example out of. That was not this Roxanne, and it is not this Roxanne. She is so vastly improved in her game. I loved her groundwork. And that's exactly where she should have taken the fight. She should have taken it to the ground, because a lot of people have the misconception that I need to stand and strike with Maycee to show that she can't knock me out like she's done with these other girls. If you think that way, you're halfway beaten at that point, because Maycee Barber 9 times out of 10 is probably going to get you out of there with her strikes. The girl is absolutely lethal. So when Roxanne employed that kind of game plan, I was incredibly happy, because of course there's always going to be holes. There isn't always a perfect fighter. You can come close to it, but at this point in her career, Maycee Barber is not there just yet. And I think that this was definitely a big lesson for her. So as far as the performance goes, I was very happy for Roxanne. I'm excited for her to see what she does next. And as far as Maycee goes, I do hope that she utilizes this time that she now has off, because unfortunately she did have a full ACL tear, which no one wants to hear. And I was so happy to see Roxanne when she was responding to a lot of the critics on Twitter saying, why didn't you attack the legs? She's like, I didn't want to damage her any further. And you have to mirror that with a lot of the behavior or a lot of the mindset of different fighters. Like, you think John Jones is thinking about that when he's oblique kicking you? Absolutely not. He's trying to damage you. It's a fight. But there are fighters like Roxanne who's like, I didn't want to take that weight out. She knew she could have finished her, and she absolutely could. She looked like a monster on the ground. But that's just not who she was. So I was very happy for her performance, and I hope that she puts on more like that. I hope that she's no longer seen as a stepping stone for these up-and-coming prospects.
Jay, anything to add to that?
When it comes to swing missing, I'm also going to go with a swing. It doesn't have the context and the story and the championship, whatever, blah, 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 behind it to make an all-time great. I mean, in terms of the numbers, in terms of the numbers, it is. But even just generally speaking, I would probably put it in my top 10 just by how dramatic the performance was. Like, if people 5 years from now look back, they'll go, oh, yeah, she beat her. And then they go, okay, she beat her up and blooded. But they won't remember that Roxy was winning the fight before Maycee Barber hurt her knee. And I mean, she tagged her. I was very impressed. But Roxanne Modafferi, at 37 years young, is still improving. That takes a special kind of fighter to realize, okay, there's things I can still learn, instead of, I've had 40 fights. I'm probably going to be good at my skill level. I'm good until I need to go. Now, for the Sherdog.com Pick'em season, not one staff member outside of a rogue Ed Carbajal on Sherdog.com had Roxy winning this fight. That's not a disrespect to Roxy or anything like that. It's more of a respect for Barber's ability and what she's done so far. She's been devastating. Aside from, I think it was J.J. Aldrich hurt her, and then she recovered and put her down afterwards. But Roxy shocked everybody. And she reminded us, right, exactly what you said, how great of a veteran, of a savvy, experienced fighter she is. She has a habit of winning these fights that people are like, oh, Roxy, whatever, she's fine, she's okay, but she'll get smoked. I mean, both Tarla Rosa fights, both Jen Hao fights. I mean, granted, we didn't know who she was when she met Jen Hao the first time. The Barb Honchak rematch, the other Shevchenko. There's just list of names of people that she's beaten that people go, she's got a snowflake's chance, and she pulls it off. In terms of the numbers, because we love the numbers, there's only a handful of fights in UFC history that have featured 10-1 favorites that have lost. There's only a small handful. Last year, Kama Worthy came into the UFC and smoked Devontae Smith. Frankie Saenz beat up Yuri Alcantara, who was the up-and-coming Brazilian star that got stopped. There's a couple other matchups in the past, prelim level matchups, but this was still a top 10 fight. Like, Roxanne Modafferi is the Sherdog.com number 9 flyweight in the world. And Maycee Barber, had she won, she would have been in the top 10 as well. So it was a huge win. It was a massive upset. And it was kind of one of those moments you go, okay, we learned something today.
I'm completely on board with that. All I'd add to it is that, in addition to working with John Wood at Syndicate, which clearly has been part of this late career renaissance for her, one of her primary coaches and training partners has been Mike Pyle. And as somebody to lay out the pattern for you of how to evolve from a fairly one-dimensional grappler into somebody who all of a sudden is carrying like rolls of nickels in their gloves, you couldn't do much better than Mike Pyle. Like, and she's having a Mike Pyle type third act to her career. You know, if you only started watching Pyle in, say, 2014 or so, you'd be like, why do they call him Quicksand? All he does is like punch people in the face and knock them out. You'd have to roll back a decade before that and be like, oh, it's because he like pulled guard within like the first 15 seconds of fights and then just ran game on people and, until he triangled them. And that's the kind of thing that it is with Modafferi. And speaking personally, rarely have I been so happy to be wrong about a fight. I was privileged to feature on the Sherdog Radio Roundtable for UFC 246 last week, and I went into slightly embarrassing detail there on how far back my history with Roxanne Modafferi goes. But suffice it to say that while I picked Barber, and because it takes me a long time to learn a lesson, if they rematch in 6 months, I'd probably pick Barber again. I was very pleased to be wrong in this case. Modafferi is doing more than just overachieving. She is remaining in real legitimate contention. And as Jay put it, she was more than holding her own even before the injury happened. So hopefully this doesn't get written off in the future as well. Mm-hmm. Barber got hurt. And, 7 or 8 years ago, we're trying to erase this like John Jones losing to Matt Hamill or something because Barber is otherwise, 21-1 and the most dominant woman in the sport. Hopefully this doesn't get erased and we don't lose sight of what an achievement it was and what a consummate performance by the Happy Warrior. With that, let's move on to what Ant would certainly call the best named segment in all of mixed martial arts media. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, in which each of our panelists will talk about something over the weekend in combat sports that surprised them or did not surprise them, ironically. It was a pretty thin card or a pretty thin weekend with just UFC 246 and then, of course, LFA 80. But I'm sure we all had something that surprised us or did not. Jay, what surprised you this weekend?
So, ever since LFA went to UFC Fight Pass, the promotion has been in charge of its own production. Now, the LFA for 77 events or so was with Access TV. And Access TV was in control of everything. They ran the entire show. So the last 2 or 3 events, LFA has been going at solo. And things haven't always played out the way that they should. There's been errors in the broadcast, names are in the wrong place. There was a fight that happened at that event where the names of the 2 previous fighters were on the names of this current fight. So, there's been some display issues. Now, this particular event, LFA 80 that took place, there was a welterweight matchup between Josh Streaker and Tyler Ray. Okay, fine. Ray tapped out Streaker, good second round rear naked choke, earned his 5th LFA win, so there's some stats in there. Cool, fine. Okay, cool. But the fight isn't what the best part was. The tail of the tape. And let me see if I can pull up the image in a second. The tail of the tape.
I will put it on the broadcast when it goes out. Okay.
It's that I have it, yeah.
The like tar pit consuming the fighters. Yes.
So the tail of the tape image, the tail of the tape, for those for some reason who aren't familiar, it's the folded arms going like this as the stats come up, was absolutely atrocious. It looked like somebody had been working on it and missed the deadline and they just ran with what they had going there. Both the fighters were surrounded by black blobs that cut out part of their faces to make them look like Manny from Grim Fandango. It was just a mess of people that had muzzles missing. They had pieces missing. They took a chunk out of the name. Josh Streaker was, I believe, Josh Streak, I think is how it happened. I don't know how it happened, but they were distorted. They were jacked up. I can't put it into words. any more than you're about to see here, or you're already looking at it here. LFA, guys, I know a guy. We all know guys that can help with graphic design. If you need a new intern, you should probably hire one, because, damn.
I mean, not to get political about this, but it looks like somebody tried to fix it with a Sharpie and hope nobody would notice.
It was like one of those markers that makes you get a headache afterwards.
I love those markers.
The big Expo markers. It was just, holy smokes, guys.
Did you say I love those markers?
I do, man. 6th grade was wild.
She doesn't remember. Oh, man, I don't remember 6th grade, man. Most of my junior high was a total blur.
Very true.
Good grief. All right, because my brain is now broken, you are up next, Kristen.
Okay. Mine is not as nightmare-inducing as Jay's was, because that was definitely some stuff with nightmares. But I also wanted to talk about Maycee Barber's initial reaction after her loss to Roxanne Modafferi, and why it didn't surprise me that she essentially like clamored for the microphone just to speak first.
Good call.
At first, it did seem inappropriate in a way, but I also realized that she is in her early 20s. She's only 21, I believe. So her first real sense of failure, there's always going to be a need to explain why that happened, or just to defend why something like that happened. So as I watched her take the microphone from Roxanne, who just had this incredible moment, she did what an underdog is not expected to do. So when they do it, it's like an insane thing. I was a little frustrated by that, because I didn't want it to take away from Roxy's moment. And some of the comments that Maycee Barber made was a little bit peculiar, saying, I'm glad that she said something along the lines of like, my performance allowed Roxy shine tonight, or something like that. And I thought that was a very weird way of putting it. But then I had to realize that everyone is going to go through that. Not everyone is going to retire undefeated. There's going to be these fights. There's going to be a loss, and there's going to be bad losses. She suffered the latter. She had a bad loss to Roxanne Modafferi. So she felt the need to explain herself, or just put out something to show people that, you know, yeah, I lost, but I'm still here, because she had this aura of, I'm this badass, which she still is. She absolutely is, but she just had this minor setback. So I wasn't surprised by that, but I saw a lot of the reaction to it. And I know it's very difficult to understand, because I'm also in my early 20s. I do that a lot, where someone is trying to explain why this happened, and I immediately get defensive. And I have to realize that it's not always about being defensive. It's not always about explaining yourself. Sometimes you just have to take these things in stride. And I don't think that she's learned that yet. So I'm not surprised by her post-fight interruption at the moment. I'm surprised by the lack of understanding from some people. I just feel like a lot of the people want it to be like, let that be Roxy's moment. But you also have to realize that she's young in this game, and she just suffered a loss that she probably didn't anticipate happening. And she just needed to take the time to say something before she left the octagon.
Excellent. I mean, it certainly raises the question. Knowing what we know about her upbringing, how quickly she was kind of thrust into combat sports and kind of thrust into a track to greatness, which she's on her way to, how many times has she lost at anything in public, and when was the last time?
Exactly. That's a very hard thing to like hold on your shoulders when you are expected to perform at like level 100 all the time, and you failed for the very first time. It's a frustrating thing. It's a sad thing. It's something that you would, and then to go out with that kind of devastating injury, which is so career altering if it was super severe, which an ACL is something that is horrible in this sport. It's obviously something that can be fixed, but 9 months away, 9 months on the shelf is something that I would imagine Maycee Barber would not have wanted, especially if she's trying to accomplish the goal of being the youngest champion and stuff like that. She's trying to go for that belt. So now she has to sit there on the sidelines for 9 months thinking about this day in and day out. No one wants to do that, but maybe some period of reflection will help her get past that it's okay that you failed as long as you come back and do what you need to do to remind everybody why you're called the future.
So what do you think was tougher on the microphone? Her doing that and cutting off Roxy, or Chris Weidman's dad saying he's still my boy?
No one's topping that moment.
Because that was real pain for a minute there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was sad to watch, but again, your kid just failed at something and it was pretty bad. Of course you want to get on the mic and just be like, he's still mine, or she's still a great fighter. You know, it's up to the person to figure out how they want to deal. And I think that initial reaction is just, I failed, I messed up, but I want to show everyone that it's okay. I'm going to come back eventually. It was just a weird timing kind of thing. So I hope people cut her a little bit of slack. I know they're making like memes about her and stuff like that, having her Kanye West moment and whatnot. And granted, those are funny. Those are very funny. I do hope that they give her some slack. She's only 21 years old. You know, she's going to make these kinds of mistakes throughout her career. So just let this be the first one that you grow accustomed to at this point.
Right. Pivoting a little bit, the UFC looks poised to grant title shots.
Hold on, time out. I'm sorry. What was your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment, Mr. Duffy?
Yeah. You know what? I'll throw it out there. On the LFA undercard, probably unseen by many because it didn't even have either of the fighters on the tail of the tape, you know, like being swallowed up by a tar pit. Sean Cerveny armbarred Edwin Cooper Jr. in the first round. Cooper jumped up and claimed that he hadn't tapped, that it was a bad stoppage. Whether it was or wasn't, I'm not going to even weigh on at this point because I'm more interested in Sean Cerveny, man of mystery. This guy is 5-0 by the Sherdog Fight Finder. And occasionally when you get somebody who's coming up in strictly regional promotions, you know, we might be missing a fight or two. You know, a fight took place on a reservation in North Dakota, or, you know, took place in Tijuana, and wrongly spelled names got back up to us. I mean, I added a 16-year-old fight for John Fitch like 4 months ago.
John Fish.
John Fish, yeah. But looking at our, you know, colleagues at, you know, Tapology and the Underground, it looks like he is a 5-0 fighter. All of his fights are wins. He's 5-0. They're all by first round submission. They're by some pretty exotic and unorthodox techniques. I mean, he's got 2 ankle locks and a heel hook. And I saw him fight at Fury Fighting Championship last summer. And just living where I do and doing what I do, I feel as though I'm pretty plugged into Texas MMA. I mean, I've seen most of these cats fight. So when I saw him on that particular card, I'm like, who's this guy from California who's 3-0? And in 50 seconds, he completely ran game on a local guy who's a pretty seasoned veteran and not generally an easy out. In 50 seconds, he got an ankle lock submission that started as a heel hook and then transitioned to an ankle lock in a way that I can only describe as filthy. And really, it just looked like one of those old Looney Tunes cartoons. You remember the Looney Tunes cartoons where there'd just be the big cloud of dust with like some fists and some feet flying out of it? This looked like one of those, only when the dust cleared, there was like an Achilles lock going on. But the weird thing about him is he disappeared for like 3 years. He's 26 years old. He fought 3 times when he was like 20 in California, which I gather that's where he's from because he was training with Cesar Gracie way back when, and then won like in Panama, and then went somewhere for 5 years. He came back. He fought in Fury Fighting Championship here in Texas last summer. He fought at LFA in New Mexico this past weekend. But he is a man of mystery. Sean Cerveny, if you're watching this show, at Benjamin Duffy on Twitter, get in my DMs because I want to talk to you. But I'm surprised to see this guy. I'm surprised to see him back. I want to know a little bit more about him because I don't know if what he does will translate to the next level unchanged, but it's certainly something very exciting. He is a wild man, and he just goes on people like a honey badger on the ground. It's very exciting to watch. And that is what surprised me this weekend. I was surprised to see him on the LFA card. I was surprised to see him do what he did. And all due respect to his opponent, I think the iffy stoppage only staved off what was probably going to happen within the next couple minutes anyway. So that's my moment.
Please get him on the show. I want to hear you talk to this person. Like, I'm very interested at this point.
Oh, you don't want to hear me like interview fighters. It's like, it's every bit as awkward as this is comfortable.
It's okay. I learned from everyone's style of interviewing, so I'm pretty sure I could take away some pointers.
Be like Chris Farley on that series that he used to do on Saturday Night Live. Hey, you remember when you did this, and
you
that?
Remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was cool.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was cool.
That was awesome.
That's how we all interview.
The UFC has appears poised to grant title shots to Yoel Romero and Jose Aldo. What do they have in common? They are both on 2-fight losing streaks. The question on the table, and I'll start with you on this one, Jay, is do rankings in general and the UFC rankings in particular matter anymore?
Well, I should preface my laughter by saying this isn't the first time. This little string of incidents is not the first time the UFC has granted a title shot to a fighter coming off multiple losses. Randy Couture, Frankie Edgar, name a couple. There maybe have been others way back when. But I don't know if I can think of a time when it's happened to a fighter that was not a champion already, like a Yoel Romero. Now, I've said before, former champions, I've said plenty of times on past shows, the former champions just seem to have an easier, quicker path to another title shot than somebody starting out fresh. Promotional angle, you think it's a lot easier to sell Bruce Buffer yelling about Anthony Pettis as a former WEC and the former UFC lightweight champ. It's an easier sell, and it's for whatever reason it is, an easier pathway back up to the top. I understand it because they've already made it that far, so they've proved they can hang at the top of the division. But it also makes it tougher to get up that ladder. I don't like either of the matchups. I'll be very blunt about them. They don't make sense for a lot of reasons. Okay, Yoel Romero has lost his last two. You can look at the last two fights and say, well, maybe they were close. Okay, fine. Maybe he beat Whitaker. Maybe I thought he beat Costa. Well, he still lost the fights because our opinions at the end of the day don't matter. MMAdecisions.com, media scores, if 16 of the 17 say that so-and-so fighter won, it still doesn't mean anything because this other guy won. Augusto Sakai beat Andrei Arlovsky last year, and every media scorecard had it for Arlovsky. I personally scored it that way, but it doesn't matter because Sakai won the fight and he got that. Other than the promotion going, we disagree with that, we don't think that matters, we're kind of stuck with the win and loss record. Now, Romero himself, his last two title fights, he's missed weight. How can they think this is a good idea? It wasn't. I used this metaphor before, so I'm going to use another one. How many times do you have to hit the beehive with a stick? It doesn't make sense to go, okay, Yoel, we don't trust you before, but we know you're getting older. We know you're scary and whatever, so let's do this again. Champions should not be in the business of calling their own shots for their challengers. It should be a factor at most. It should be, okay, the champion has a say, this is a good matchup, and they can sell the fight. That's about as far as I believe that a champion should have their say, because they can announce to the promotion, this is a better fight because we can sell it, because it's more competitive. I don't know. But this is the matchmaker's jobs. This is not social media. This isn't a Twitter poll. This isn't something like that. So for Yoel Romero to get the title shot over other fighters is uncomfortable and a little irresponsible, but it's par for the course these days because Jose Aldo lost a fight. He just lost. The first time he's ever fought at this new weight class, he lost. He lost the fight. Sorry, guys. Even if you think he won, he still lost the fight. And he is getting a title shot. And over multiple fighters in the division that deserve a title shot and that are active and are healthy and able to take it. You could say Paulo Costa's got bicep surgery, so he's out for 6 months. So maybe Romero can step in the meantime. Not really a great argument, but that's an argument. What do you have for Aldo? Peter Yan just ruined and almost re-retired Uriah Faber. Aldo Sterling is on a killer win streak himself, and they're getting passed up because it's a former champion, because it's a fight selling. I don't know exactly what it is, because what's the point? And this ties back to the question after my little rant here, that rankings don't seem to matter in a lot of in many schemes of things. Promotional angle and selling the fight is what matters more in this era. This isn't a new thing. This isn't an ESPN era. This isn't a Fox era. This has been around for a while. Brock Lesnar, how many big fights did he get? You know, how many wins did he have in the UFC before he fought Randy Couture? You know, it's unfortunate, and we can be mad about it, but the promotion's going to do what they want, and that stinks. You know, what's the point of working your way up the ladder? What's the point in Peter Yan taking another fight, Aljo Sterling taking another fight? Tony Ferguson had to have how many? What was it, 10 fights before he got an interim title shot against Kevin Lee? He had to have 10, I think it was 10 wins, and then he lost it because he got hurt for a few months, and then had to fight who? Pettis, and then Donald Cerrone. So it's just not to not harp on it, saying it's not fair, because who cares? This is an entertainment game. It's just stupid. I don't see how we can be like, okay, fine, we're good. It'll be fun. It'll be over soon. I just can't get into it, guys. I know. I'm sorry. I can't do it.
What do you think, Kristen?
I will say that this is exactly what you just described it, or you capped it off as. This is an entertainment game. We are in the WME era at this point. So obviously those big names, those former champions, exactly, those are the things that rakes in the dough for the UFC. And as frustrating as it is to see rightful contenders be passed up for these bigger name, potentially bigger money fights, it sucks. It definitely sucks to watch that. But this is all part of what we have to deal with now as far as entertainment goes, because this sport is just as much about fighting as it is entertainment. Or maybe I flip those, but you know what I mean. Those kinds of things are what sticks out in the minds of fans. Now, I will say the argument for Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero getting a title shot against Israel Adesanya is a little bit better than the one Jose Aldo has for Henry Cejudo. And I will say that Israel Adesanya played a big role in this. He called for this fight. He said that they always want to say that I don't have a ground game, or that I don't know what to do against a wrestler. Well, let's test it out against an Olympic wrestler. Let's test it out. Granted, I would love to see that. I'm not a naysayer or a doubter when it comes to Israel Adesanya at this point. I have nothing to doubt. He's shown what he can do. But if this is something that you as a fighter are willing to put out there and show, hey, I am a complete fighter. I can do this, I can do that, and I can also take on this Olympic wrestler who says he's going to hold me down for the better part of 5 rounds, but I know what to do now. By all means, I want you to do whatever you think is best for you and for your career in the long run, because these are going to be things that we're going to talk about. These were things we were talking about when Israel came in. Yes, he's a dynamic striker. But what about if he fought a wrestler? Okay, here we go. Here's your chance. This is the perfect timing. Kelvin Gastelum had a little bit of that going on, I think, in his fight, but it wasn't the kind of caliber we're talking about with Yoel Romero. And I think he has the better case because of that, and also the Paulo Costa thing, which I'm very confused about. Are you injured for 6 months? Are you injured for 3 months? I don't know what it is. I'm very confused. I wish I had a little bit more clarity as to why Paulo Costa cannot take this fight, because honestly, I would love to see a Paulo Costa versus Israel Adesanya. It's the same thing. He wants this fight no matter what. He got on the cage after he demolished Robert Whittaker, and he looked right after at Paulo Costa, called him an inflated balloon animal, called him, what did he say about Ricky Martin? Something, but it was hilarious. I absolutely loved it. And I said, you know what? I would want to see these two incredible strikers fight each other. But sometimes those things don't always work out. I'm still in the dark about the whole injury thing. I know it's a bicep injury, but it's the time of recovery that's weird to me. I will allow the Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero fight. I have no qualms about that. You could definitely make the argument that he won the fight against Paulo Costa. That's your preference, you know, and maybe the UFC sees it that way. Maybe they do think that he won. So I could see that. As far as the Henry Cejudo and Jose Aldo fight, I am in agreement with you, Jay. I don't understand why this is even a thing. All of a sudden, we are now getting Twitter videos that are cringe-inducing, which I think is the purpose of the shtick. And that is what we got the fight based off of, because these two sent a couple of Twitter videos towards each other, and the bend the knee thing and the midget thing. We got that. That's the fight. That's the merit that this fight is supposedly made out of. I can't defend the making of this fight. Like everybody else, I'm going to watch it just to see what happens. But I am in agreement that there are a lot more contenders that should have gotten this call first. I actually made the call for an interim bantamweight championship, which I hate. I dislike interim championships when they are overused and misunderstood pretty much all the time. Because even when you're an interim champion, it's like, okay, I could be interim champion today, but that doesn't mean I'm going to fight the champion. I would have rather seen that happen between Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan. I would have loved to have seen that. But here we are. We can't say that he's no longer not defending his title. He's about to defend his bantamweight title against Jose Aldo, probably the least deserving out of the names that we've spoken about. But that's the game. This is the entertainment game. These are the fights that are going to be made. And those are the things that we're going to have to accept. We don't have to like it. I know I don't, but we have to accept them. That's just how it is at this point.
You know, and it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that it is about the entertainment business, that the UFC, and I have railed about this, about the flyweight division, but I want to take that in a different direction, that the UFC will put a fight together or not put a fight together because it's not the biggest money fight. If you don't put a fighter in an opportunity to have that big fight, how can they possibly be able to become a big fighter if they're on the prelims?
Right.
On that same UFC 248, I think it's 248, the Romero Adesanya card, there's a perfectly willing and able contender fighting on the card that doesn't have an opponent right now. Jared Cannonier has 2 fights at middleweight. He kicked Anderson Silva's leg off, and he smashed up Jack Hermanson. Now, okay, 2 fights, not big deal, but whatever. Well, he won these last 2 fights brutally. Yoel Romero has lost those last 2 fights in close fashion. Level of competition, whatever you want to say, he isn't ranked high enough, anything like that. Romero is 3, and Cannonier is 4. So it isn't a big gap. It doesn't make sense when they have, and this ties to exactly what you said, it doesn't make sense when they have people right there that are worthy and deserving of these fights. A money fight with Romero, when has Romero sold a big fight? He and Whittaker did 250,000 pay-per-view buys. So Romero being a big ticket item, where is that coming from? Jose Aldo, when he fought Max Holloway the second time, the numbers weren't great either. The only big money fight he had was with the Irishman. Well, you know, you kind of can put those together. So I don't understand how the UFC can put on an entertainment show and sell this is the money fight. Well, how do you know that? Have you ever put Peter Yan in the big opportunity to do so and get Russia behind him? Have you ever put Aljo Sterling? He is a personality. He is a fun guy to watch fight, and he's a fun guy to listen to afterwards. If the UFC doesn't use their fighters, and push them, well, of course they're not going to be money fighters. Of course they're not going to be spotlight fighters and marquee fighters. The UFC doesn't treat them like that. So I feel like it's incredibly short-sighted. That's all. I had to take a second turn, I know. Duffy, what do you think about that? What do you think about these fights?
My main problem with putting together these matchups is, what does the UFC usually at its best have that no other promotion has, or no other promotion has to the same extent? And we kind of touched on it in an inverse sense when we opened up with the question of, was 246 the biggest card with the fewest implications? What the UFC normally has that Bellator, One, Invicta all struggle with is, when a card is done, the UFC usually has a pretty clear picture of what happens next. What is next for these fighters? And that's because even though their job is to sell pay-per-views and put butts in seats and make money, it isn't professional wrestling. It is something that, at least nominally and at least theoretically, is built on the idea that we are here to figure out who is the best fighter. And any matchmaking they do that is anything other than, let's match the two best available fighters in each weight class, it is the equivalent of setting fire to your house to stay warm. Yes, you will stay warm, but it is not sustainable in the long term. Every cotton candy matchup that they make cripples their ability to get an actual ladder of contention going in these divisions and make matchups going forward that make sense. Now, they can go for all the sensational matchups, and we'll have Jake and Logan Paul fighting for UFC championships in 2 years. And I'm not saying that will literally happen, and I'm being a little sensationalistic, but I'm saying that if you have demonstrated that your matchmaking for your highest level fights is based on anything but other than who is most deserving based on what they've done in the octagon, that's the direction you're headed. You know, and it really is kind of one or the other. So that's my only problem with it, because I'm fine watching Cejudo versus Aldo. I have a feeling what it'll look like, but I'm happy to watch it. I feel the same about Adesanya versus Romero, even though I feel like this is Adesanya's kind of Bisping versus Henderson moment. I think one of the reasons he is calling out Romero is that Romero was a credentialed wrestler who was not going to use his wrestling. Like, is there an easier way to check off beat a wrestler from like your dance card than fighting Yoel Romero in 2020? When was the last time Romero beat somebody relying primarily on his wrestling? I'll wait.
Clifford Starks? It's been a while.
Was it in the UFC? It was, but like that's all I'm saying. He has a silver medal hanging somewhere, but it's not anywhere like between his ears, because he is just, as currently constituted in the octagon, he is a wild man striker. That is what he has. He has the threat that he could take you down, that has influenced some of his opponents' reactions a little bit. And he has gone to it as a safety valve once or twice. I mean, the second Whitaker fight, he did use it some. But he is not a wrestler by preference as an MMA fighter. Anyway, long way around to saying that I'm here for the matchups that the UFC wants to make, if they want to make them like this, but they are burning their own house down to stay warm. They are, for an organization that is obsessed with titles, obsessed with belts, they are inflating and devaluing the currency that their own promotional model is built on. And I'll watch that happen and comment on it too, but doesn't sound like a smart move to me.
So I'm fact checking myself real quick. He flying knee Clifford Starks. I was thinking of Ronnie Marks. The arcs at the end was what got me.
Pivoting to the number 2 promotion in the Western Hemisphere. CBS-Viacom has put Steven Espinoza in charge of Bellator and explicitly over Bellator president Scott Coker. Does this change anything for Bellator? Open question.
Perhaps. I think this is the perfect opportunity for Steven Espinoza to be extremely petty. And
no way. That's not his nature.
It has to be. It has to be. I don't know if you guys saw the tweet that he put out right after UFC 246 concluded. He's like, I would have been upset if I bought that card. And I'm like, relax, okay? It was a good card. I know that your whole thing is I would have been upset that I bought how much is the pay-per-view now? Like $64.95?
$64.95 this one was,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for something to happen in 40 seconds and then you just go home. Well, a lot of people used to buy Mike Tyson pay-per-views too, and they were over in like seconds. So no one's complaining about that.
That's every date in my 20s.
You know what I mean? So it's
spend $64.95 and something was over in 40 seconds.
So it's one of those things where I think this is a good opportunity. I don't know how much changes under Bellator, but I do think there are going to be a lot more instances of I'm going to try and make this a number 1 versus number 2 kind of thing. And if Steven Espinoza has anything to do with it, I know that they are going to up the ante a little bit just to spite Dana White, just to spite the UFC. Because that's just what the business is. That's fight business. You're going to have these, not opponents, but you're going to have these competitors, I guess. And so now you are in this business. Steven Espinoza, as far as boxing, cool, you're with it. But now he has his foot in the door with MMA. And I'm interested to see what it is that he's going to do. But I know in the back of his mind, there's always going to be, how can I get one over on the UFC? And I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out for Bellator, because Bellator does have its issues here and there. As far as fight goes and as far as like contenders as well. I think we can all agree that some of the fights that they make, some of those are just those example fights where we want to show our biggest star beating someone up for a good couple of rounds. And you can apply that to several fighters on the Bellator roster, but we won't get into that.
No idea.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the MVP specials, this is a question that brings questions. This is the kind of thing that I want to answer your question with a question, not like Jeopardy, but just, will Coker be autonomous? Like, this is a real serious question. That the news, the press release that was issued is that he will be directly reporting to Steven Espinoza. Does that mean he has to clear decisions with Steven Espinoza, or does that mean if Steven Espinoza wants to do something, that's what's happening? Now, there's a very fine line, but there's a distinct difference there. If Coker can call the shots and all he has to do is get a check mark, or Coker is beholden to CBS-Viacom now, because Coker, for love him or hate him, I mean, he's put together Bella Force. He's put together a greatest hits of Strikeforce with this Showtime organization. It is a true Bella Force. If they put it back on Showtime, you got that going. Now our buddy, our hopefully you're watching this sometime soon, Ant Walker, says that our own Scott Coker is the pettyweight champion. Well, Steven Espinoza has something to say about that, and they're going to be working together / against each other. I don't know how that relationship is going to pan out, because they're, Scott Coker isn't always antagonistic directly, and Espinoza is. So, yeah. Kristen, you got it. If Espinoza is going to fight with the UFC, and I can see this happening. I can picture programming events to counter-program the UFC cards. I can absolutely see that happening more than it does now. Now, granted, UFC has 42 shows a year, so it's hard not to, just on the dates alone. But I can see them putting a Cyborg Bud card against Conor McGregor over here, because it has a big to-do. Now, the other question is that since CBS Showtime, that whole situation, I almost said Endeavor, but that's a whole different company, will be involved, production almost certainly will change. Think about the UFC's transition to Fox into ESPN. The production has changed, sometimes in small ways, but gradually, just so the new company put their stamp on it. So I think we're going to see some changes that they might sneak in to production, to broadcast. Luckily, and I say this luckily, I say this with the almost utmost respect, Gus Johnson works for Fox Sports, so we're not going to have to see him again. But we could see shows on CBS now. We could see shows on Showtime now. Bellator has the ability to broadcast fights on DAZN, on Paramount, and also their little apps and .com stuff. And now they have CBS and Showtime and CBS Sports, if you want to talk about that too. I pray to all things. I pray to the just bleed God, I guess, that doesn't mean that Bellator is going to split its product up amongst all of the different services, because I don't think anybody would buy DAZN and Showtime to watch Bellator. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. There are so many questions I want to know the answers to, because they're big questions. Does it mean that DAZN, as far as I remember, DAZN and their Bellator contract will be around for a little while. It's not a 2-year contract, I don't believe, that started with Roy versus Lima the first time. So DAZN's in the picture. From everything I know, DAZN doesn't share well. They're exclusive for the most part. There's very few instances where they'll share. It's mostly because of geography. Well, we don't carry DAZN in this country, so we can't host it. I think we're going to have a lot of fights and squabbles, and I'm not looking forward to that. But things are going to change. Yes, things will change a lot.
Any thoughts on this? Well, actually, you already kind of weighed in. All I'll say is, as someone who is an MMA fan to a much greater extent than a boxing fan, 3 years ago, I could have told you who Steven Espinoza was, what his job title was. I could have found him on LinkedIn for you,
Mm-hmm.
But my real exposure to him was being a major figure in putting together Mayweather versus Pacquiao, and then being a major figure in putting together Mayweather versus McGregor.
Yep.
And my first exposure to kind of his temperament and his tendencies was him going at data over the pay-per-view sales figures for Mayweather versus McGregor.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can see him entering the pettyweight rankings really quick. But I don't care about that. What I would love to see is if on an operational level, he makes Bellator's product more accessible to the fans who want to see it. Because all the other stuff aside, the weird retirement circuit for 40-something former UFC fighters, the way they treat some of their younger prospects like wood in a wood chipper and others like fine china on the shelf, all those things are minor quibbles. Bellator's biggest problem is that their shit is hard to find and hard to watch. Like, even as someone who does this professionally, that's my biggest quibble with Bellator. Why is it so hard for me to see your stuff? So that's all I care about out of Steven Espinoza here. Let's move on to
watch it right here on the app.
I have too many days when I spend like 7 hours staring at my phone for other reasons. I don't want to do it on a Saturday morning. There's a card going on in Ireland or Italy. Anyway, let's move on to the speed bag round, where in the absence of Mr. Walker, I will flex my authority. And this is going to feel really strange since I'm normally a chronic offender on the 10-second rule. But I'm going to ask 3 questions. Each of you will have 10 seconds to answer. And then at the end, I will try to tackle all 3 questions in 30 seconds. For this one, let's start with you first, Kristen. At 38 years old and climbing, will Holly Holm earn another title shot at some point?
It's very possible. I don't know how many contenders Amanda Nunes has at this point. So if she gets another win, I could definitely see that happening.
Oh, with 2.5 seconds to spare. Lovely. Jay, at 38 years old, will the recently victorious Holly Holm earn another title shot?
I think the only way that happens is if Amanda Nunes walks away from the sport, because there's nothing for her in either division right now.
All right. Nobody even threatening the clock on that one. Pretty easy question, I guess. Jay, sticking with you. Now a member of the UFC roster, how far can previously Rizin light heavyweight contender Jiri Prochazka go?
They should give him a sink or swim matchup right off the bat. Tell us exactly how he's going to do, because otherwise I see big things for him.
Ding. All right. I love how y'all are like going easy on me, or like don't want to hear whatever like noise I'm going to make if you get to 10 seconds.
I'll go over on the next one just because.
I don't even have a bell or anything. Kristen, Jiri Prochazka, what do you see for him in the UFC 205-pound division?
I agree with Jay. I see some big things for him. I always love new blood in the light heavyweight division because it desperately needs that jolt, and I think he's the one to give it to him.
All righty. To you again, Kristen, with Fabricio Werdum, former UFC heavyweight champion, getting a reduced suspension that now lifts in April. Whom should he face in his return bout?
The recently victorious Alexei Olenek. He called for it in his post-fight conference, I think, and Fabricio returned the favor on Twitter. So if you guys like it, so do I. Let's do it.
Off the cuff, who you got in that one?
I'm going to lean with Fabricio, but like slightly, because anything can happen with those two, honestly. I just want to see it get to the ground. That's all I care about.
Jay, whom should Werdum fight in April or whenever he returns after April?
It has to be Olenek. It's the only option for me. Think of how exciting of a slugfest is going to be. I mean, there's no way they're going to go to the ground. So I'm going to break the rule right here, and you can interrupt me if you want. So Fabricio Werdum got off the suspension because he provided substantial assistance to the USADA sanctioning of other people. So he snitched straight up in official USADA slang. He specifically led to other people actually getting punished. That's the word in the language. It isn't just I call an anonymous tip. He has to provide specific evidence that gets somebody else nailed, and he did. So dang, how about that? Ding.
Wow. All right, I will tackle all three of these in roughly 30 seconds. At 38 years old and climbing, will Holly Holm ever earn another title shot? Likewise, I don't think she will as long as Amanda Nunes is around. So with that in sight, probably not, period. How far can Jiri Prochazka go? I'm not as high on him as you two are. His record is gaudy. He has like 10 wins in a row, last 5 or 6 by knockout, but not over... I could see him fizzling quickly. I don't have faith in him. But at the same time, this is the UFC light heavyweight division in 2020.
Dang.
One big win, and he's on John Jones's doorstep. They're desperate for someone to fight him. I mean, look at like Dominic Reyes, who could have used another couple fights. Werdum, I'm fine with him fighting Olenek. I mean, he was ranked like 3rd in the UFC heavyweight division when he got the suspension. I would be fine with him jumping right back in and fighting the winner of this weekend's matchup between Blaydes and the man whose name escapes me at the moment.
Dos Santos.
Thank you, Junior Dos Santos. I would be fine with Werdum slotting right back in there. He's over 40. His time is short. He was a top 5 guy before he was suspended.
Yeah,
I'm sure I probably talked for like 2 minutes. I'm sorry. This weekend,
minute 20 seconds.
Harsh.
I'm sorry, Ant.
You got to come back and have him respect the clock.
He's gonna lay down the hammer when he gets back.
Pure anarchy. Dogs and cats living together. All right.
That's hysteria.
Speaking of Blaydes versus Dos Santos, the UFC takes to Raleigh, North Carolina this weekend with a card headlined by the two heavyweight contenders. What is your pick for fight of the night? And is the winner of the main event up next for a heavyweight title shot, Jay?
You know, I'm going to go with Frankie Edgar versus Corey Sandhagen. I can't go with that one. That one's fall off the card. Fine, I'll go with Josh Emmett versus Arnold Allen. No, still nothing. No. This event took a huge hit the past couple weeks or so. This was a real serious wow, this is a fight night card, to, oh, this is a fight night card. It very quickly. Now, Arnold Allen versus Nick Lentz, that's a fine replacement. There's no replacement for Corey Sandhagen, so that's too bad. Headliner in the co-main event, the headliner, Blaydes versus Dos Santos, okay, fine. Rafael Dos Anjos versus Michael Chiesa, cool. That's an interesting style matchup. I'm looking forward to it. And then you're dropping down to Jordan Espinoza and what is it, Alex Perez? It's who are middling, accidental top 10 flyweight contenders because of the way the division only has like 14 members in it. Not a bad fight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trashing on these guys, but we have to look through the card, and you have to kind of pick through here and go, okay, oh, that's right, Daquan Townsend's back after taking fentanyl not long ago, so we'll see how that's going for him. Oh, Sarah McMahon is back after having a baby. She's fighting Lena Landsberg. Okay, that's kind of cool. Fight of the night. Oof. This is a tough one. I'm going to go Angela Hill, Hannah Cifers, because I think that Angela Hill is going to draw out a brawl. I think Cifers is the kind of girl who is okay to take a punch because she's super strong. As long as Cifers doesn't press her against the fence and reenact Holly Holm's most recent performance, I think they could really just wail on each other for 3 rounds. But as for the other question about the title shot, if the UFC skips Francis Ngannou, especially Curtis Blaydes wins, then I'm going to have another rant about that, because you remember, who's the only guy who's beaten Curtis Blaydes? Francis Ngannou, who did it twice.
For in a way that makes us not want to see it a third time.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Like, for top 10 heavyweights, like, you're 2 wins away from a title shot these days. Except the belt isn't being defended. Now, I'm worried about Stipe Miocic on a media and a kind of a personal level, because I don't know how many people have been listening to the rumors and scuttlebutts, but that Miocic's eye, because he suffered some bad eye pokes in the Cormier fight, Cormier fights actually, that the eye isn't recovering the way it's supposed to be, that there are rumors and concerns that he's going to have to hang it up. The division, I don't know. It's hard to see who's going to get a title shot these days, because it has to be Francis Ngannou. It has to be. You saw what he did to Cain Velasquez. You saw what he did to Junior Dos Santos, 2 former champions, smoked him in like 3 minutes combined. It can't not be. But if there's no title to defend, are we going to have a vacant title fight of Daniel Cormier versus Francis Ngannou? You really want to let Daniel Cormier go out with that fight? I don't. I don't think he does either. That's an interesting fight, I guess. But think of how badly it could go, and how sad we might feel at the end of the fight and go, oh, okay, thank you, Daniel Cormier, for all you did. Now pick your jaw up after it's over there on the floor. Or, oh, yay, 5 rounds of heavyweight clinching. I'm okay with that. So, the heavyweight division is so confusing right now that this fight won't give us as much clarity as I wish it would, because Curtis Blaydes is the best fighter. He's the best number 3 fighter in the division, and that only gets you so far. And, well, it's a fight night card. We'll be watching.
What's your take, Kristen?
So my fight of the night, obviously, since we have some slim pickings here, the card definitely took a beating. I would have to say Brett Johns versus Tony Gravely. I've always been excited to watch Tony Gravely's performances on like the regional circuit. So I'm excited that he got his chance on Contender Series, and I'm excited for him to make his debut against someone who's probably willing to trade with him. So I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. As far as the contenders fight, or if this is to lead to a heavyweight title shot, I don't necessarily know. I think that we have to look at this fight, and we also have the upcoming fight with Francis Ngannou and Jairzinho Rozenstruik.
That about that fight.
Yeah, that fight is made. We're supposed to be waiting for that. So I believe either the winner of that fight may get a title shot, or, as much as you guys don't want to see it, it's a very real possibility that the winner of the Curtis Blaydes and Junior Dos Santos fight takes on the winner of the Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Francis Ngannou fight. And that could lead to Blaydes versus Ngannou 3. But at I know. I'm sorry. I hate
No, it's legitimate. Don't worry.
you know, at this point, we really don't have a direction for the heavyweight title picture at this moment, because I know I was wondering what was going on with why there wasn't Cormier versus Miocic 3 being scheduled anytime soon. So that makes a lot of sense what you are saying, and that is truly unfortunate. If that were to cause Stipe to hang it up early, then he probably would have wanted to anyway. So I think you just have to keep in mind those two fights at the moment. And if the problems with Stipe and Daniel Cormier 3 are not solved, then we have a number one contender fight with the winner of those two fights.
Awesome. My take, I'm excited for Hill versus Cyphers as well. My only problem is that Angela Hill, more than just about any other top 10 fighter, her performances are dependent on her opponent, not in terms of whether she wins or loses, but in terms of how she fights and how watchable it is.
Yep,
depending on who she's fighting, you can be like, wow, this is the best strawweight in the world. Or you can be like, is she even good at fighting? Because, and I don't mean that as an insult, because she is one of my favorite fighters. Like, I think she's awesome, but against the wrong fighter, she won't pull the trigger. She'll get pot-shotted by a worse striker. She'll get bullied by a fighter who isn't as strong as she is. I don't know how to explain it, but I've observed it. And I've observed it many times since before she was even in the UFC. Having said that, Cyphers is smaller than she is, or at least roughly the same size, and an aggressive come-forward fighter. She is the type of fighter that will draw fireworks out of Angela Hill if anyone can. So win or lose, I'm on board for that one. Also, Chiesa versus Dos Anjos could be fight of the night if Chiesa wins. If Chiesa loses, it's going to be the worst fight of the night. So, talking about your style matchups. I love Chiesa and I love Dos Anjos, but if Dos Anjos beats Chiesa, we know what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to just be kind of a grim, grueling death march of a mashing. Whereas if Chiesa beats Dos Anjos, it's going to be something spectacular. Where, I mean, he's had those back-to-back fights against Condit and Sanchez, where both times he just like big brothered good grapplers, did things to them with one hand that should take two hands to do. You know, like when he beat Condit with basically the police brutality, like hammerlock behind the back. Like, so that could be an exciting fight, but you both have said it better than I could already on the heavyweight title picture. Much as I would or wouldn't want to see one thing or the other, it would feel weird to slot Blaydes into a title shot if Ngannou is sitting around off a win and waiting. Just the criticisms write themselves.
So it's going to happen then, because they already did that for two other divisions now.
Clearly, what makes Ben mad is not on like their list of things that they make their matchmaking decisions about. So I'm here for whatever it is, I guess. Our final segment of the evening is Buried Treasure, where each of us will offer up a story that we think should have received greater coverage and is perhaps just flying a bit under the radar. Jay, what have you got for us?
So I'm going to tell you guys a story, and one of you may have heard it and the other one may have heard me talk about it. So to all your listeners, buckle up. There is a Polish organization that is brand new, and it's called Wotore. Wotore. They held an event this past weekend on Saturday before UFC 246 to get everybody to have their just bleed moments and get excited for what's going to happen. The premise of this organization is to take MMA back to the gladiatorial days. Okay, so it's a 30 by 30 flat circle surface surrounded by sandbags in an abandoned prison. Buckle up. So the execution of this event, here's the rules.
You have to say execution.
Well, here's the rules.
Wait, hold on. I'm waiting for the rules.
That my silence is speaking volumes, I hope. It is bare knuckle MMA. Standing headbutts, go right ahead. 1 round, no time limits, no weight limits. You can only win the fight by knocking out or submitting your opponent. You can actually tap out, so there's a referee there. Or by chucking your opponent out of the ring twice, because that's the ring out rule. It was a one-night, 8-man tournament. There's about a foot or so drop-off from the stage to the actual floor, which is a moat around it, which was shrouded in mist I can't make this kind of stuff up. So guys were hurled into the mist, and you could only see parts of them because they were covered in mist. Now, shout out to Ganryu Ojima, a Japanese promotion that actually had that kind of similar moat fights, which was style versus style, karate versus taekwondo, and those kinds of things. There were their gis, and it was very exciting. And they had a moat that you could toss guys into. It was just a flat surface with mist in it. But still, for a $5 pay-per-view, I was way beyond entertained. It was shocking how entertaining and horrible and amazing and bad it was. I can't speak volumes about it. It's not something that will ever end up in Sherdog Fight Finder, I'll tell you that much. But it was a spectacle. And that was exactly what this promotion has done. Now, this isn't the first Polish promotion that is a spectacle event. There's an organization called Fame. And I don't want to say freak show fights because that demeans some of the competitors, but there was what's the word nowadays? I don't even know. There was a smaller person that was about 3'6" maybe that competed against a 6'4" guy. And the little guy almost got some good shots in, but the range and the reach advantage got to him. That was a real actual fight held in this Fame promotion. I watched the darn thing. It was horrible. So Poland, you keep being you, and Wotore, I'll be there for the next one. Let's get weird.
Can I just say I'm upset that I didn't realize that was $5? Like I've spent way more on stupid things. I would have bought that for $5.
I'll send you the link later. It's a ride. I guess it's a theme park. It's a circus.
I have so many questions. Like
I might have some answers.
You had to throw somebody into a moat full of dry ice twice?
Yeah.
Twice. I think the reason why is because they didn't want a sumo guy to just walk in and just push everybody out and go, oh, that's boring. So they made it so you can push a guy out and then you have to do it again. So it isn't just and the fight's over, because that could be boring. That could make fans go, no, I don't like that. So they would be beating each other up along the way. Double ring outs don't count. So if you tackle a guy and go for a double and you both go flying out and off the ring and onto the ground and hit the sandbags with your head, you just get restarted in the middle. It's real.
Wow.
It's 2020, guys. 2020.
Kristen, you are now expected to top that.
Everyone, lower your expectation, because I don't think I'm gonna top that. However, my buried treasure for this week is I want everyone to pay attention to what's going on with Justin Gaethje and his supposed rightful title shot or attempt at a title shot. Dana White recently said that him and Justin Gaethje need to sit down and get on the same page, and I cannot agree more. I am wondering why this why this rift started in the first place. We kind of got a little bit of this ominous, well, Justin knows what he did. We don't know. Justin didn't really say anything. He made mention to certain fights that he did not take or he was not ready to take at the time. And of course, turning down fights or appearing to turn down fights is always negative in the eyes of this entertainment business. But I would hope that there is some kind of common ground that Justin Gaethje and the UFC can eventually meet at, because it would be the most unfortunate thing for him to be bypassed for a rightfully owned title shot. And I've seen people say, well, he just beat Edson Barboza, James Vick, Donald Cerrone. They're not ranked high enough. We're taking all that out of him. He got it done first round, like spectacular finishes. And if that doesn't warrant a title shot, I don't know what else should. So I would hope that the situation is resolved sooner rather than later. And my wish is for Justin Gaethje to eventually fight the winner of Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. But with the recent Conor win, that's all up in the air. So don't forget about Justin Gaethje. He's still there, and he has a right to a title shot at this point. So don't forget about that. That's my first treasure.
Now let me just piggyback off that real quick. I said earlier in the broadcast that Justin Gaethje was the first lightweight to knock out 3 guys in a row in the first round. I don't believe I'm correct. I believe that the first person to do that was BJ Penn in his first 3 fights in the UFC. You know what he got after doing that? Title shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent observation. And I certainly have not forgotten about Justin Gaethje. All right, my buried treasure. This last weekend, of course, was a Conor McGregor card. And that always brings a particular breed of fan out of the woodwork. That's just the nature of things. That's, something that's been the case since his first rise to stardom. But this past weekend, one such fan was to be found on press row. I will not dignify either the outlet or the media member in question by name, but a video went slightly viral this past weekend of a person, media member on press row, who had filmed himself, presumably with his phone, during the headliner, McGregor versus Cerveny, just going absolutely bonkers in favor of McGregor, just going crazy, like literally jumping up and down in his seat and screaming, "He's back," which on one level is certainly an acceptable and popular way to feel right now, but completely and screamingly inappropriate for somebody who was there in a professional capacity. And I saw a certain amount of the conversation on Twitter saying, why are you all such a bunch of killjoys? We're all fans inside. Why can't you show some excitement? Well, there's a good reason for that. And both the UFC's own print regulations and the bylaws of the Mixed Martial Arts Journalists Associations, and I said their name, so insert your own punchline there, but just know that I belong, and whether they want to exist or not, I believe in what they stand for. They both say no open rooting or cheering for fighters on press row. And there's a reason for that. There is a certain veneer of impartiality and professionalism that should be part of what we're doing here. Do I have some fighters that I like more on a personal level than others? Absolutely, I do. And without asking, my guess would be that Jay and Kristen probably do as well. But for the most part, you wouldn't know when they're working in a professional capacity. Like, being professional is inserting that wall, that screen between your internal feelings and what you're there to do. Like, unless you're comfortable with the idea of your gynecologist walking into the room with a raging boner, or your food arriving at the table with a bite taken out of it because it was just so delicious the chef couldn't help but take a bite out of it, then don't defend somebody who's acting like a fucking fan while working as a press member. That's what I got. Buried treasure. May it stay buried. I'm so sorry I said raging boner.
It's okay.
Anyway.
Great analogy.
This has been a once in a very long time episode of Unleashed. Kristen, please tell the good people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Kristen King MMA, and you can find my work on My MMA News.
And may I say, this is your second appearance on our show, and your t-shirt game is beyond impeccable.
Thanks. Could you see the little
PlayStation to Playboy?
Yes.
Like you're working on a theme.
I like to play. I come here to play. That's what I'm doing. So I have to stick with the theme.
Love it.
That's the way you get a third invitation for sure. Like, we want to see what you got next time.
It's already sale.
Awesome. Jay, where can the people find you?
You can find me at shirtdog.com. You can drop down into the little features column, and I'm right there, and you can find all my works. I can promise you that when I'm writing up play-by-play and a fighter that I may or may not like loses, I will not go, oh, dang it, I can't, oh, no. Or when the other guy wins, go, he's back, oh my God. Because I'm not a child, I'm a professional. So, yep, with that, I'm everywhere in the world of fighting you want me to be.
I am a child, but even when I was a child, I had a job and I was expected to like behave appropriately there. So there you go. I'm Ben Duffy. You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy. You can find me on Instagram at Benjamin Duffy if you want to see pictures of kids and food. And of course, you can find me on Sherdog.com where I write and do a bunch of different stuff. But for the time being, I have 3 instructions for you. You must stay beautiful. You must stay positive. And above all, you must stay sexy. Peace.